My friends, I want to speak to you as if you were sitting right here in front of me, not as strangers, but as brothers and sisters carrying a dream. You see, leadership is not a title. Leadership is the courage to stand in the storm when everyone else is running for shelter. Leadership is the decision to rise, even when life has pushed you down 100 times. I have walked through villages where mothers had nothing but still gave everything for their children. I have met young men who were told, "You will never amount to anything," yet they refused to believe the lie, and today they are building businesses, schools, and futures. Ordinary people doing extraordinary things. You see, greatness does not begin when the world applauds you. Greatness begins when you decide, in the privacy of your own heart, that failure will not define you. The truth is this: not everyone can handle this message, because this message demands change. It demands responsibility. It demands that you stop blaming your past, stop excusing your circumstances, and start believing in the possibility of tomorrow. Hear me carefully: the future will not be built by the strongest arms, nor by the loudest voices. It will be built by the ones who dare to persevere, the ones who believe that hope is stronger than fear, that faith is greater than doubt, that unity is more powerful than division. I know you may feel tired. I know some of you may have prayed for change and not yet seen it. But remember this: a seed buried in the ground looks dead until one day it breaks through the soil and becomes a tree. Your life is that seed. Don't quit in the darkness, because your dawn is coming. So I call you to rise, to dream again, to lead not with arrogance, but with humility, with courage, and with love. Because the world is waiting for your gift, waiting for your voice, waiting for your leadership. And when you leave this moment, let it echo in your heart: the future is not something we wait for. It is something we create, and it begins with you. Greatness does not begin on the stage. Greatness does not begin when the cameras are on you, when the lights are shining, or when people finally recognize your name. No, my friend, greatness begins in a place that no one else can see. It begins in the secret chambers of your own heart. It is birthed in that quiet decision when you tell yourself, "I refuse to be defined by my failures. I refuse to be chained by my past. I will rise, even if I have to rise alone." Think about it for a moment. Every person you admire, every leader you celebrate, every voice that has inspired you, they all had to begin at this same place. Not with applause, not with validation, but with conviction. A conviction deep within the heart that whispered, "I am more than my circumstances." You see, the danger of life is that the world will try to convince you that greatness is external. It will tell you that greatness belongs only to the rich, the powerful, the educated, the well-connected. But history proves otherwise. Some of the most influential men and women were born in obscurity. Some grew up in poverty. Some carried scars from rejection and abuse. Yet what separated them was not what they had on the outside, it was what they carried inside. Greatness begins in the heart, because the heart is where battles are first won or lost. Before you step into the world, you fight wars within yourself. Wars of doubt, wars of insecurity, wars of fear. And the truth is, nobody sees that battle. Nobody applauds you when you are wrestling with your own shadow at midnight. But if you win there, if you conquer within, then no power on earth can stop you when you step out. I remember hearing the story of a young man who was told by his teachers that he would never succeed. They said he was too slow, unfocused, too ordinary. He went home with those words echoing in his mind, and he had a choice to make: to believe the voices around him or to listen to the voice within. He chose the latter. He said to himself, "I may be overlooked, but I am not finished." That young man grew to become one of the greatest inventors of his generation, changing the lives of millions. Why? Because greatness does not respond to the world's opinion. It responds to the decision of the heart. There are people right now who are waiting for perfect conditions before they believe in themselves. Waiting for money, waiting for opportunities, waiting for someone to come and validate them. But hear me carefully: greatness does not wait for conditions. It creates conditions. If you can win in your heart, you can win in your life. Think of the seed buried underground. Nobody claps for the seed. Nobody celebrates the dirt covering it. In fact, it looks forgotten, invisible, dead. But inside that seed is a life force, a determination that says, "I will not remain in the dark forever." And in time, that seed pushes against the soil, breaks through the surface, and becomes a tree that provides shade, fruit, and life to others. Greatness begins the same way: hidden, unseen, misunderstood, but alive in the heart of the one who refuses to quit And I want you to understand something. Failure is not the opposite of greatness. It is part of the journey toward it. Every person who has achieved something meaningful has walked through failure. They stumbled. They fell. They were told no. They lost money, lost friends, lost opportunities. But in those moments, their hearts were being tested. Because the heart asks only one question: will you rise again? Some of you listening right now are carrying disappointments that feel too heavy. You have faced rejection that wounded you deeply. You have dreams that seem delayed, maybe even dead. But hear this truth: greatness begins the moment you decide that those failures will not define you. You may bend, but you will not break. You may weep, but you will not quit. You may lose battles, but you will not lose the war, because your heart is stronger than the storm you are in. Greatness is not about how you start. It is about how you choose to continue. You don't need the crowd to clap for you. You don't need everyone to agree with you. You don't need permission to rise. What you need is the courage to believe right now, in this moment, that there is more inside you than the world has seen. Ordinary. That word has been used to dismiss, to minimize, to reduce people into categories where no one expects greatness. You have heard it before. It's just an ordinary boy. She's just an ordinary girl. Ordinary becomes a label stamped on the forehead of people who do not fit into society's narrow picture of success. But what the world calls ordinary, God often calls extraordinary in the making. Because history is not written by the flawless, but by the faithful. It is not written by those who had everything, but by those who refused to surrender when they had nothing. Think about the people we call heroes today. At one point, they were invisible. They were shopkeepers, farmers, teachers, clerks, sons, and daughters who looked like everyone else. They were overlooked by the elite, underestimated by the powerful, and unrecognized by the crowd. Yet when their moment came, they rose. Why? Because inside every so-called ordinary person lies the capacity to do something that changes the world around them. I remember hearing about a young woman who worked as a maid, cleaning houses to survive. Nobody knew her name, nobody saw her potential, and society did not value her. Yet she carried a dream in her heart, and she refused to let that dream die. She began writing stories in her free time, using scraps of paper to pour out the imagination burning inside of her. That woman became Maya Angelou, one of the greatest poets and voices of her generation. She was labeled ordinary, but she became extraordinary. The truth is, the difference between ordinary and extraordinary is not talent, it is not money, it is not an opportunity. It is a decision. The decision to persevere when others give up. The decision to rise when life knocks you down. The decision to see beyond what is and believe in what can be. Extraordinary is simply ordinary with a choice to keep moving forward. There are people you pass by every day. The taxi driver, the cashier, the neighbor next door. And you may think, just another ordinary life. But hidden inside them could be the next inventor, the next leader, the next healer, the next voice that brings change to nations. This is why we must never despise small beginnings, because the seed that looks insignificant today could grow into the tree that shelters generations tomorrow. Even in your own life, you may have believed the lie that you are too average, too unremarkable, too ordinary to do anything that matters. But let me remind you, every giant was once a child. Every president was once a student. Every leader was once unknown. Ordinary beginnings are the womb of extraordinary destinies. The challenge is this: ordinary people often wait for someone to give them permission to be great. They wait for a stage, for recognition, for applause. But extraordinary people decide, even if no one believes in me, I will believe in myself. Even if no one claps, I will still move forward. Even if I walk alone, I will walk anyway. That decision transforms an ordinary life into an extraordinary legacy. Consider Thomas Edison. He was labeled as a poor student, dismissed by his teachers, and considered slow. Yet he refused to let that define him. He experimented, he failed, he tried again, and he gave the world the light bulb. Ordinary, yes, but extraordinary in perseverance. Or think of Rosa Parks, a seamstress on an ordinary bus ride, who decided one day that she would no longer surrender her seat. That single decision sparked a movement that reshaped history. Ordinary, extraordinary in courage. Ordinary people become extraordinary when they stop measuring themselves against the world's standards and start measuring themselves against the greatness inside them. You may not have wealth, but you have resilience. You may not have fame, but you have vision. You may not have applause, but you have purpose. And when you align with that purpose, ordinary breaks open into extraordinary. There are young men and women today sitting in classrooms, working behind counters, building quietly in obscurity, who will one day rise to lead nations, to heal communities, to innovate industries. They may not look like much now, but neither did the heroes of yesterday when they first began. Never underestimate the power of the hidden, the humble, the overlooked, because that is where extraordinary is born. So when you hear the word ordinary, don't shrink back. Don't accept it as an insult. Embrace it as the soil from which something remarkable can grow, because the truth is every extraordinary life is simply an ordinary person who chose not to stay ordinary. The greatest tragedy of life is not the absence of opportunity. It is the refusal of responsibility. Too many people are waiting for the world to change while forgetting that they are the ones called to change it. Future does not shape itself. It is molded, guided, and directed by those who take ownership of their choices, their actions, and their vision. Responsibility is not a burden. Responsibility is the birthplace of destiny. From the time you were born, life placed something in your hands. For some it was a gift, for others it was painful. For many, it was a challenge, but whatever it was, the moment you decide to take responsibility for it, that moment you begin to shape your future. Responsibility says, I will not blame my parents. I will not blame my environment. I will not blame the government or the system. I will do what I can with what I have right where I am. You see, people often look at successful leaders and imagine they were given everything. But if you look closely, you will discover they were not born with ease. They were born with responsibility. They carried burdens that forced them to grow. They carried challenges that demanded courage. They carried trials that trained them for triumph. Responsibility is what transforms potential into power. There is a young man I once read about who grew up in poverty. His father left when he was still a boy. His mother worked multiple jobs just to keep food on the table. He could have chosen to let bitterness consume him, to say, I am a victim, I am trapped, my future is lost. But instead, he took responsibility. He studied hard, he worked late. He refused to let his circumstances dictate his destiny. That young man became President Abraham Lincoln, one of the greatest leaders of his generation. He was not born extraordinary. He was born ordinary, but he accepted the extraordinary responsibility of shaping his own life and his nation's future. Danger of blaming the past is that it robs you of the future. Every time you say, I can't because of what they did, you hand over your power. But when you say, I will rise in spite of what happened, you take it back. Responsibility is reclaiming your power. It is declaring that your life will not be a reaction to your circumstances, but a creation of your decisions. Look at the farmer in the field. He does not control the rain. He does not control the sun, but he takes responsibility for planting the seed, for tilling the ground, for protecting the harvest. And because he does his part, the future responds. Responsibility is the same. You may not control every condition around you, but you are responsible for your response. And that response determines whether your seed becomes a harvest or remains in the soil of wasted potential. The truth is, responsibility is not glamorous. It is not exciting when you first begin. It looks like waking up early. It looks like discipline. It looks like a sacrifice. It looks like choosing to do what is right even when nobody is watching. Ordinary people avoid responsibility because it feels heavy. Extraordinary people embrace responsibility because they know it is the only weight that builds strength. Consider the story of a woman named Florence Nightingale. She was born into a wealthy family in England, expected to marry well and live comfortably. But she felt a calling in her heart to care for the sick and the forgotten. At that time, nursing was not considered a noble profession. It was dirty, despised, looked down upon, yet she took responsibility for her purpose. She walked into filthy hospitals, cleaned wounds, and risked her life to save soldiers during war. That responsibility transformed her into the founder of modern nursing. She carried what others avoided, and in doing so, she shaped the future of healthcare for the world. Every generation faces a choice: complain about the problems or to take responsibility for solving them. Some wait for leaders to rise. Others realize they are the leaders they have been waiting for. Responsibility calls us to stop waiting. It calls us to act, to rise, to lead. It is not about being the most powerful person in the room. It is about being the one willing to carry what others drop, to fix what others break, to build what others abandon. Your life is waiting for you to take responsibility. Your family, your community, your future, they are all waiting, because the future is not shaped by those who complain the loudest. It is shaped by those who take ownership and act with courage. Destiny is not built in a single moment of success. Destiny is not born in applause, nor is it given as a gift. Destiny is built in the quiet persistence of perseverance. Truth is, life will test you, dreams will be delayed, plans will collapse, people will doubt you, and in those moments, the temptation will come to quit. But perseverance is the power to keep walking when your legs are tired, keep believing when your heart is heavy, to keep moving forward when everything in you screams to stop. The difference between those who fulfill their destiny and those who abandon it is not talent, it is not intelligence. It is not an opportunity, it is perseverance. Because perseverance is the proof that you value your destiny enough to fight for it. Perseverance is the fuel that carries you from the valley of defeat to the mountaintop of victory. Think about a runner in a marathon. At the start, the crowd is cheering, the energy is high, and the pace is fast. But as the miles stretch on, the body grows weary, the lungs burn, and the applause fades. Many give up halfway, yet those who persevere, those who refuse to quit even when their strength feels gone, are the ones who cross the finish line. Destiny works the same way. It does not reward the ones who start with excitement. It rewards the ones who finish with endurance. There is a story about Thomas Edison. He failed thousands of times in his experiments before inventing the light bulb. When asked about his failures, he said, "I have not failed. I've just found thousands of ways that will not work." That mindset is perseverance. He could have quit at failure number 100 or 500 or 1,000. But he pressed forward until his destiny was fulfilled. And because of his perseverance, the world stepped out of darkness into light. Perseverance builds destiny because it transforms setbacks into stepping stones. It takes rejection and turns it into redirection. It takes pain and forges it into power. Without perseverance, destiny will remain only a dream. But with it, your dream becomes reality. Every great leader, every innovator, every world changer has walked through seasons of struggle where the only thing that kept them standing was perseverance. Consider Nelson Mandela. He spent 27 years in prison, unjustly locked away for fighting against apartheid. He could have grown bitter. He could have given up on his cause. But he persevered. And when he was finally released, stepped into his destiny as a unifier, not a destroyer, a leader who shaped the future of a nation. His destiny was not built in the comfort of freedom, but in the perseverance of prison. Some of you listening now are in that season of delay, that place where nothing seems to be working, where every door feels closed, where every step forward feels like 2 steps back. And the voice of doubt tells you, it's over. Quit now. Stop trying. But let me remind you, every destiny worth having requires perseverance. A diamond is formed only under pressure. Gold is purified only through fire. And your destiny will be revealed only through perseverance. Perseverance is not glamorous. It does not always look like victory. Sometimes it looks like tears on your pillow. Sometimes it looks like trying again after another rejection. Sometimes it looks like standing alone while others walk away. But perseverance is powerful because it says, I will not give up. I will not surrender. I will not let this moment define the end of my story. Look at the farmer once more. He plants the seed and waits. The rain does not come when he expects it. The soil looks barren. Days, weeks, months pass with no visible change. Yet he keeps watering, keeps believing, keeps persevering. And then in due season, the harvest appears. Destiny is the same. You may not see the results today. You may not see them tomorrow. But perseverance ensures that in the right season, your harvest will come. Every person alive will face moments when perseverance is the only thing standing between them and their destiny. And those who yield to weariness will miss the fullness of what could have been. But those who persevere, those who hold on even when holding on feels impossible, are the ones whose names echo in history. Because perseverance is not just enduring suffering, it is transforming suffering into strength, and that strength builds destiny. Leadership is one of the most misunderstood words in our time. Too many people think leadership is about power, position, or prestige. They think it is about being on top, being in control, or being served. But true leadership has nothing to do with titles and everything to do with responsibility. Leadership is service, courage, and vision. It is the willingness to carry the weight others avoid, to stand in places others fear, and to see what others cannot yet see. Service is the foundation of leadership. If you want to know the heart of a true leader, do not look at how many people serve him. Look at how many people he serves. A leader is not remembered for the size of his throne, but for the size of his sacrifice. Think of Mother Teresa, who walked the streets of Calcutta, feeding the hungry, caring for the dying, loving the forgotten. She had no title, no army, no wealth. Yet her service made her a leader the whole world recognized. Service is not a weakness. Service is strength under control, choosing to use your influence not for self, but for others. Courage is the backbone of leadership. Every generation faces fear, and leaders are the ones who confront it. Courage does not mean the absence of fear. It means standing firm in the presence of fear. Courage is looking at the impossible and still taking the first step. Courage is speaking truth when lies are more popular. Courage is standing for justice when silence is safer. Think of Martin Luther King Jr., who stood on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial and declared his dream. He knew his life was at risk. He knew his voice was dangerous to the status quo, but he spoke anyway. Leadership requires that kind of courage, the willingness to step forward when the cost is high. Vision is the compass of leadership. Without vision, leadership becomes management. Without vision, leaders simply maintain the present rather than shaping the future. Vision is the ability to see beyond the immediate, beyond the temporary, beyond the obstacles in front of you. Vision is seeing not just what is, but what can be. Leaders paint pictures of tomorrow that inspire people to move today. Think of Nelson Mandela, who endured decades in prison but never lost sight of a free South Africa. That vision sustained him when the walls closed in. That vision gave him strength when years dragged on. Vision is what gives leaders the ability to endure and to inspire others to endure with them. When service, courage, and vision come together, something powerful is born. A leader emerges who does not chase followers, but attracts them. People follow leaders not because they are forced to, but because they are inspired to. They see the service, they respect the courage, they are captured by the vision. And suddenly, ordinary men and women become part of an extraordinary movement because one person dared to lead with the right heart. Tragedy of our time is that many who call themselves leaders do not serve, do not stand, and do not see. They exploit rather than serve. They fear rather than stand. They manage rather than envision. And the result is confusion, corruption, and collapse. But the hope of every generation rests in the rise of leaders who remember the truth that leadership is not about crowns, but about crosses. It is not about what you take, but what you give. It is not about your comfort, but about your calling. There is a story told of a soldier in battle. His unit was ambushed, and many were wounded. The enemy fire was heavy, and no one wanted to risk their life to go back for the injured. But one man, without hesitation, ran into the line of fire and carried his comrade on his back. Again and again he returned, rescuing one after another until he himself fell. That man was a leader. Not because he wore stars on his uniform, but because he embodied service, courage, and vision. His service was his sacrifice, his courage was his action, and his vision was his belief that no one should be left behind. Leadership is not about how loud your voice is, but how strong your heart is. It is not about how many followers you gather, but about how many leaders you raise. It is not about securing your place in history, but about shaping a future where others can rise higher than you ever did. Leadership is service, courage, and vision, and when those three flow together, destinies are changed, nations are transformed, and history is rewritten. My friends, we have walked together through a journey of truth. We have seen that greatness begins in the heart long before the applause ever comes. We have seen that ordinary people become extraordinary when they choose to rise above excuses and embrace the power within them. We have seen that the future is not written by chance, but by responsibility, by those who refuse to blame the past and instead shape tomorrow with their choices today. We have seen that perseverance is not just endurance, but the very force that builds destiny out of trials, tears, triumphs. And we have seen that true leadership is never about position, but about service, courage, and vision that calls others to rise higher. The truth is simple, yet it is powerful. The world is waiting for hearts that will not quit, waiting for ordinary lives that will dare to dream, waiting for men and women who will not wait for the future, but who will shape it with responsibility, with perseverance, and with leadership that serves, stands, and sees. This generation is standing at a crossroad. On one side is fear, doubt, division, and excuses. On the other side is hope, faith, unity, and responsibility. And the choice rests in your hands. The baton of destiny has been passed to us. What we do with it will echo in the lives of our children, in the history of our nations, and in the story of humanity itself. So rise. Rise from the shadows of doubt. Rise from the weight of fear. Rise with courage in your heart, vision in your eyes, and service in your hands. Because the future is not something we wait for. The future is something we create. And it begins with you right here, right now.